The explosions had stopped 3 hours ago, but Sergeant Marcus Chen could still taste metal and smoke in the air. He crouched behind the twisted remains of what used to be a hegemony transport, scanning the battlefield through his rifle scope. Bodies lay scattered across the gray sand of Kepler 442b, a mix of human marines and Zephyrian soldiers, their bright blue blood mixing with human red in the alien dirt. This was supposed to be a simple extraction mission. "Get in. Grab the intelligence files from the abandoned research station. Get out." Nobody mentioned the Zephyrians would be here too, and nobody expected them to fight so hard for what looked like a worthless rock in space. Marcus adjusted his position and swept his scope across the crater-marked landscape. The Zephyrians had withdrawn 2 clicks north after the bombardment, leaving their dead behind. Standard procedure for them. Honor the fallen by letting them become part of the soil they died defending. But something caught his attention near the research station's entrance. Movement. He focused his scope and felt his breath catch. A Zephyrian warrior sat propped against a concrete barrier, very much alive. The alien's distinctive crystalline armor caught the orange light from Kepler 442b's twin suns, creating rainbow patterns across the damaged metal. But something was wrong with the picture. The Zephyrian's legs were gone. Marcus lowered his rifle and pulled out his binoculars for a better look. The alien warrior appeared to be female, though telling Zephyrian genders apart was tricky for humans, with the typical pale blue skin and silver hair braided in warrior knots. Her armor was cracked in several places, and dark blue blood stained the ground around her. But she was alert, her large violet eyes scanning the area just like a good soldier should. What made Marcus pause was the way she kept looking north, toward where her people had retreated. She was waiting, hoping, but no rescue was coming. Marcus had fought Zephyrians for 3 years now, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Defense Coalition and got dragged into their war with the hegemony. He knew their culture, their tactics, their honor codes. Zephyrians valued strength above all else. A warrior who couldn't walk, couldn't fight, couldn't keep up with the unit. They became a liability. Honor demanded they be left behind to die with dignity, rather than slow down the survivors. It was practical. It was logical. It was also completely heartless by human standards. Marcus checked his comm unit. His extraction shuttle wouldn't arrive for another 4 hours. His squad had been wiped out in the fighting. He was alone on this rock with nothing but time and a conscience that wouldn't shut up. He could just wait it out, stay hidden, avoid contact, go home with the intelligence data they'd recovered. Command would be happy. He'd get a medal, maybe a promotion. The Zephyrian would die alone, and the universe would continue spinning. But Marcus found himself thinking about his sister Sarah, who'd lost both legs in a hovercar accident when she was 19. She'd been an athlete before that, planning to try out for the Mars Colony racing team. After the accident, everyone expected her to give up, to accept a quiet life of limitations. Instead, she'd become a mechanical engineer, designed her own prosthetics, and eventually helped develop the powered exoskeletons that let disabled civilians work in low-gravity environments. She was stronger after losing her legs than she'd ever been before. Marcus looked through the binoculars again. The Zephyrian warrior had found a piece of debris, looked like part of a rifle stock, and was using it to try to drag herself toward better cover. Her movements were efficient, controlled. No panic, no despair. Just a soldier doing what needed to be done to survive. "Ah, hell," Marcus muttered, slinging his rifle across his back. "Sarah's gonna kill me if she finds out I walked away from this." He grabbed his medical kit and started moving toward the research station, keeping low and checking for threats. His training screamed at him that this was stupid. Zephyrians were enemies. They'd killed thousands of humans in this war. Their society was built on conquest and military dominance. Everything logical said to let her die. But Marcus had learned something in 3 years of war. Sometimes the most human thing you could do was ignore logic entirely. The Zephyrian noticed his approach when he was still 50 meters out. She stopped trying to move and reached for a sidearm, her violet eyes tracking his movement with predatory focus. Marcus could see the weapon shake in her grip. She was weaker than she was letting on. "Easy there, warrior," Marcus called out, raising his hands to show he wasn't holding a weapon. "I'm not here to fight." The Zephyrian's response came in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "Come to finish what the bombardment started, human?" Her voice was steady despite her injuries. Marcus had to admire that kind of discipline. "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead," Marcus replied, taking another step forward. "I'm a sniper. I could have put a round through your head from half a kilometer away." "Then what do you want?" Her grip on the sidearm never wavered, though Marcus could see the effort it took to keep the weapon steady. "To help." Marcus stopped about 10 meters away, close enough to talk without shouting, but far enough to avoid threatening her personal space. "You're hurt. Your people left you behind. I have medical supplies and time to kill." The Zephyrian's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Help? Your species is at war with mine, human. Why would you help me?" "Because it's the right thing to do." Marcus shrugged. "And because I've got a sister who taught me that losing your legs doesn't mean losing your fight." For a long moment, they stared at each other across the alien battlefield. Marcus could see the calculations running behind the warrior's violet eyes. Trust versus suspicion, pride versus pragmatism, death with honor versus life with help from an enemy. Finally, she lowered her weapon. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human." "Probably both." Marcus approached slowly, his hands still visible. "What's your name, warrior?" "Sub-Commander Cathara of the 7th Void Lancers." Her formal tone carried the weight of military protocol. "And yours?" "Sergeant Marcus Chen, 3rd Marine Recon." He knelt beside her, setting his medical kit on the ground. "Mind if I take a look at those injuries?" Cathara studied his face for several seconds, then nodded. "Do what you will. But know this, human. If you mean to torture me for information, I will give you nothing. Not interested in intel, just trying to keep you breathing." Marcus opened his kit and began pulling out supplies. "When did you lose them?" 3 hours ago. Proximity mine." Cathara's voice remained steady, but Marcus could see pain creeping into her expression as the adrenaline wore off. "The blast threw me clear, but my legs—" She gestured at the stumps where her legs had been severed just below the knees. Marcus examined the injuries with professional detachment. The cuts were surprisingly clean. The mine's shrapnel had sliced through bone and tissue like a blade. Her armor had automatically sealed around the wounds to prevent bleeding out, and her enhanced Zephyrian physiology was already beginning the healing process. She'd live, but she'd never walk again without serious medical intervention. "Your armor's medical system saved your life," Marcus said, cleaning the wound sites with antiseptic. "But it's designed for temporary measures. These need proper treatment." "Treatment my people cannot provide." Cathara watched him work with curious intensity. "Our medical technology can regrow limbs, but the process requires 3 months in a regeneration chamber. We are at war, human. The 7th Void Lancers cannot wait 3 months for one warrior to heal." "So they left you." "So they left me." She said it without emotion, but Marcus caught the slight tightness around her eyes. "It is the way. A warrior who cannot fight is no warrior at all." Marcus applied fresh bandages to the wounds, working with practiced efficiency. "That's a pretty screwed-up way of thinking." "It is practical. The needs of many outweigh the needs of one." Cathara paused. "Your people think differently?" "Some do. Others don't." Marcus finished with the bandages and sat back on his heels. "But where I come from, we've got a saying, leave no one behind. Doesn't matter if you're walking or crawling or being carried. If you're one of ours, you come home. Even if bringing you home costs other lives? Marcus considered the question seriously. Sometimes, it's not always logical, but logic isn't everything. Cathara was quiet for a long moment, processing this alien concept. Your species is strange, Marcus Chen. Yeah, we get that a lot. Marcus checked his chronometer. My ride shows up in 3 hours. That gives us time to get you stabilized and figure out what comes next. What comes next? Cathara's laugh held no humor. I am a legless Zephyrian warrior abandoned on an enemy world. What comes next is death. Not if I have anything to say about it. Marcus stood and offered her his canteen. You thirsty? She accepted the water gratefully, though Marcus could see the internal struggle it caused her. Accepting help from an enemy went against everything she'd been taught about honor and strength. Why are you doing this? She asked after drinking. You gain nothing from helping me. In fact, you risk much. If your commanders discover you aided an enemy warrior, they'd probably court-martial me, Marcus admitted. But sometimes doing the right thing means risking the consequences. The right thing. Cathara tested the phrase like she was tasting something foreign. Your species places much importance on this concept. More than we should sometimes. Less than we should other times. Marcus settled into a comfortable position where he could watch the approaches while they talked. Tell me about the Void Lancers. What kind of unit were you with? Elite reconnaissance. We were investigating reports of hegemony weapons research at this facility. Cathara gestured toward the research station. Intelligence suggested they were developing new plasma technologies that could shift the balance of this war. Did you find anything? Before the mine took my legs, I managed to download partial data files. They are still in my armor's storage system. She touched a panel on her chest plate. Though I suppose that information dies with me now. Maybe not. Marcus pulled out his tactical pad and checked the extraction protocols. My shuttle has medical facilities. Basic stuff, but enough to keep you stable for transport. Transport where? To your prison ships. To a hospital, if I have my way. Marcus met her gaze directly. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. If I bring you back with me, you'll be a prisoner of war. But you'll be alive and you'll get proper medical treatment. There's a chance they could fit you with prosthetics, maybe even restore your mobility. In exchange for what? Information about Zephyrian military operations? That's not my department. I'm just a grunt with a rifle and a stubborn streak. Marcus checked his weapons automatically. Old habit. But I've heard our POW facilities are decent. Clean beds, regular meals, medical care. Probably better than dying alone on this rock. Cathara was quiet for a long time, staring north toward where her unit had vanished. Marcus let her think, understanding that she was wrestling with concepts that challenged everything she'd been taught about honor, duty, and survival. In Zephyrian culture, she said finally, to be captured alive is considered shameful. A warrior should die fighting rather than submit to the enemy. Good thing you're not being captured, Marcus said. You're being rescued. Is there a difference? About 1,000 light years worth. Marcus smiled. Rescue implies someone gives a damn whether you live or die. Capture is just taking inventory. Cathara studied his face with those unsettling violet eyes. You speak as if my life has value, even though we are enemies. All life has value. That's another one of those human concepts that doesn't always make logical sense. Marcus shrugged. Besides, you're not my enemy anymore. You're just a wounded soldier who needs help. Your commanders may not see it that way. Then I'll convince them otherwise. The confidence in Marcus's voice surprised even him. I didn't carry you this far just to watch you die in some interrogation cell. For the first time since he'd found her, Cathara smiled. It was a slight expression, barely visible, but it changed her entire appearance. "You are a most unusual human." Marcus Chen. "So I've been told." Marcus checked his chronometer again. 2 hours until extraction. "So, what do you say, Sub-Commander? Ready to find out what human hospitality looks like?" Cathara looked down at her missing legs, then back toward the empty horizon where her people had abandoned her. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of a decision that would change everything. "I accept your offer, human. But know this, if your people treat me poorly, if they torture me or leave me to die in captivity, I will find a way to make you regret this choice." "Fair enough." Marcus extended his hand. "Partners." Cathara stared at the offered hand for a moment, then clasped it with her own. Her grip was surprisingly strong despite her injuries. "Partners," she agreed. "Though I suspect we are both about to learn just how complicated that arrangement can become." As the twin suns of Kepler 442b began to set on the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield, Marcus Chen made a decision that would echo far beyond this moment. He'd chosen compassion over protocol, humanity over military doctrine. He had no idea yet just how much that choice would change the course of an entire war. The extraction shuttle's engines screamed as it descended through Kepler 442b's thin atmosphere, kicking up clouds of orange dust that made both Marcus and Cathara squint against the debris. Marcus had managed to fashion a crude stretcher from pieces of the research station's furniture, and Cathara lay secured to it with emergency straps from his kit. "Remember what we discussed," Marcus shouted over the engine noise as the shuttle touched down. "You're my prisoner, but you're also under my protection. Don't give them a reason to shoot first and ask questions later." Cathara nodded, though Marcus could see the tension in her jaw. Being helpless went against every instinct she'd developed as a warrior, but she'd agreed to trust him. That trust was about to be tested. The shuttle's rear ramp dropped, and 3 Marines in full combat armor came charging out with weapons ready. Behind them, Marcus could see Corporal Williams, the unit's medic, carrying his emergency medical kit. "Sergeant Chen!" The squad leader, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, kept his rifle trained on Cathara while addressing Marcus. "What the hell is this? Command said you were bringing back intelligence, not prisoners." "Change of plans, Rodriguez." Marcus stood between his fellow Marines and Cathara, his own weapon deliberately lowered. "This is Sub-Commander Cathara of the Zephyrian 7th Void Lancers. She's wounded and requires immediate medical attention." "Wounded Zephyrians are still Zephyrians, Sergeant." Rodriguez's finger hovered near his trigger guard. "They've killed enough of our people that I'm not feeling particularly charitable." "Stand down, Marine." Marcus's voice carried the authority of 3 years in combat zones. "She's my prisoner and my responsibility. Williams, I need you to check those leg wounds. She lost both legs to a proximity mine." Williams approached cautiously, his medical instincts warring with military caution. When he saw Cathara's injuries, his professional demeanor kicked in. "Jesus, Sarge. How is she still conscious? The blood loss alone should have killed her." "Zephyrian physiology is tougher than ours," Marcus explained while Williams began examining the bandages. "Plus, their armor has basic life support systems, but she needs real medical attention, not field patches." "I can stabilize her for transport," Williams said, already pulling equipment from his kit. "But she'll need surgery within the next 12 hours or those wounds will start going septic." Rodriguez was speaking into his comm unit, reporting the situation to whoever was commanding this extraction. Marcus caught fragments of the conversation. Unauthorized prisoner acquisition, and potential intelligence value and deviation from mission parameters. None of it sounded promising. "Sergeant Chen," Cathara's voice was quiet but clear, "perhaps you should reconsider. Your fellow warriors seem displeased." "They'll get over it." Marcus crouched beside the stretcher as Williams worked. "How are you holding up?" "I have been better." Despite the pain she had to be feeling, Cathara managed a wry smile. "Though I admit your medic is more gentle than I expected." Williams looked up from his work. "You speak standard pretty well for a Zephyrian." "I was trained for reconnaissance operations," Cathara replied. "Language skills were required." "Yeah, well, reconnaissance skills aren't going to help you where you're going." Rodriguez finished his conversation and turned back to the group. "Command wants to know why you deviated from mission parameters, Chen. They're not happy about unauthorized prisoner acquisition. Tell Command that sometimes opportunities present themselves," Marcus said. "Cathara has intelligence about hegemony weapons research, the kind of information that could save human lives." It wasn't entirely a lie. Cathara did have data files from the research station, but Marcus's primary motivation had nothing to do with intelligence gathering, and they all knew it. "Load her up," Rodriguez ordered, though his expression remained skeptical. "But Chen, you better hope Command sees it your way. Bringing back wounded prisoners without authorization is the kind of thing that ends careers." The flight back to the human forward operating base took 6 hours. Marcus spent most of that time sitting beside Cathara's stretcher, monitoring her condition and thinking about what would happen when they arrived. Williams had managed to stabilize her injuries, but she'd need proper surgical intervention soon. "Marcus," Cathara said during one of the quieter moments in the flight, "what will happen to me when we arrive at your base?" "Honestly, I'm not sure." Marcus adjusted the straps holding her stretcher in place as the shuttle hit turbulence. "You'll be processed as a prisoner of war, probably questioned about Zephyrian military operations, but you'll also receive medical treatment." "And after the questioning?" "Depends on how cooperative you are, I guess, and how useful your information turns out to be." Marcus met her violet eyes. "But I'll do what I can to make sure you're treated well." "You have already done more than I had any right to expect." Cathara's voice held a note of genuine gratitude. "In Zephyrian society, what you have done would be considered a great honor. You have shown mercy to a fallen enemy. In human society, what I've done might be considered insubordination," Marcus replied with a grim smile. "But sometimes doing the right thing means ignoring regulations." The forward operating base was a collection of prefabricated structures and defensive positions carved into the surface of a small moon orbiting a gas giant. As the shuttle approached the landing pad, Marcus could see the controlled chaos of a military installation at war. Supply convoys moving between buildings, maintenance crews working on damaged vehicles, soldiers drilling in the low gravity. The moment the shuttle touched down, Marcus knew he was in trouble. A full squad of military police was waiting on the landing pad, along with Colonel Harrison, the base commander. Harrison was a career officer known for his strict adherence to protocol and his low tolerance for creative interpretations of orders. "Sergeant Chen," Harrison's voice cut through the engine noise as the shuttle powered down. "Step away from the prisoner and report." Marcus reluctantly stood and snapped to attention. "Sir, Sergeant Marcus Chen reporting with intelligence asset and prisoner of war." "Intelligence asset?" Harrison approached the stretcher where Cathara lay, studying her with the cold efficiency of a professional soldier. "This is Sub-Commander Cathara, isn't it? We have files on her unit." "Yes, sir. She was investigating hegemony weapons research at the target facility. She has data files that could be valuable to our operations." "I see." Harrison gestured to the MPs. "Secure the prisoner for transport to the medical facility, then to interrogation. Sergeant Chen, you're with me." As the MPs moved to transfer Cathara to a medical transport, she caught Marcus's eye. "Remember your promise, human." "I won't forget," Marcus replied, earning a sharp look from Colonel Harrison. Harrison's office was spartanly decorated with military efficiency. A desk, 2 chairs, a wall display showing the current tactical situation, and a shelf of regulation manuals. The colonel took his seat behind the desk and gestured for Marcus to remain standing. "Sergeant, Your mission was intelligence gathering and extraction. Nothing in your orders authorized taking prisoners. Harrison's tone was deceptively calm. Care to explain why you deviated from mission parameters? Sir, the prisoner represents a valuable intelligence opportunity. Sub-Commander Keth Ara has access to information about enemy operations that could benefit our tactical situation. That's not what this is about, Sergeant, and we both know it. Harrison leaned back in his chair. I've read your psychological profile. You have a history of making decisions based on personal ethics rather than military necessity. Your actions on Proxima 3 when you refused to abandon those wounded civilians. Your intervention in the prisoner abuse incident on Titan Station. Marcus kept his expression neutral. Sir, I followed proper protocols in both those situations. You followed the letter of military law while completely ignoring strategic considerations. Harrison stood and walked to the tactical display. Tell me, Sergeant, what happens when word gets out that we're providing medical care to enemy combatants? When Zephyrian High Command learns that one of their warriors is in human custody instead of dead on the battlefield? I'm not sure I understand the concern, sir. The concern, Sergeant, is that wars are fought as much in the realm of perception as they are with bullets and bombs. Harrison touched the display, bringing up images of recent battle sites. The Zephyrians respect strength and despise weakness. Showing mercy to their wounded might be interpreted as weakness. It could actually make them fight harder, knowing that surrender or capture isn't the death sentence they've been taught to expect. Marcus felt a cold realization growing in his stomach. Sir, are you suggesting that showing mercy to prisoners is strategically counterproductive? I'm suggesting that in war, sometimes mercy and strategy are incompatible. Harrison returned to his seat. However, what's done is done. The prisoner is here, she's wounded, and she apparently has intelligence value. We'll extract whatever information she has, provide necessary medical care, and then decide what to do with her. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Sergeant. You're being reassigned. Transport duty, running supplies between the outer system colonies. Consider it a cooling-off period while we decide whether your judgment can be trusted in combat situations. The dismissal stung. But Marcus had expected worse. When do I ship out, sir? 3 days. That gives you time to complete your after-action reports and attend the prisoner's initial interrogation as a witness. Harrison's expression softened slightly. Sergeant, I understand the impulse that drove your actions, but in war, individual conscience must sometimes yield to larger strategic concerns. The next time you feel compelled to rescue enemy combatants, I suggest you remember that your primary duty is to your fellow humans. Marcus saluted and left the office, his mind churning with conflicting emotions. He'd saved Cathara's life, but possibly at the cost of his own career. More importantly, he was beginning to understand that the simple moral choice he'd made on the battlefield was about to become much more complicated. The base medical facility was a sterile collection of treatment rooms and surgical suites built to handle combat casualties. Marcus found Dr. Sarah Kim, the chief medical officer, in her office reviewing patient files. Sergeant Chen, Dr. Kim looked up as he entered. I was wondering when you'd show up. Your Zephyrian prisoner is quite interesting from a medical standpoint. How is she doing, Doc? Stable for now. We've completed the surgical debridement of her leg wounds and started her on a course of broad-spectrum antibiotics. Her physiology is remarkably resilient. Most humans would have died from shock and blood loss hours ago. Dr. Kim pulled up Cathara's medical scans on her wall display. However, there are some complications. Marcus studied the images, though his medical knowledge was limited to battlefield first aid. What kind of complications? The way her legs were severed, combined with the emergency cauterization her armor performed, has created some unusual scarring patterns. Regenerative therapy would be extremely difficult, even with Zephyrian medical technology. She's likely looking at permanent disability without some kind of prosthetic intervention. Can our technology help her? Possibly. We've made significant advances in neural interface prosthetics over the last few years, but implementing them would require extensive surgery and months of rehabilitation. Dr. Kim turned from the display to face Marcus directly. That raises the question of whether we're willing to invest that level of resources in an enemy prisoner. She's not just a prisoner, Doc. She's a person who deserves a chance to live with dignity. That's a very human perspective, Sergeant. I'm not sure our command structure will see it the same way. Dr. Kim's expression was sympathetic but realistic. For now, I'm keeping her comfortable and monitoring her recovery, but long-term treatment decisions will be made at levels well above my pay grade. Marcus left the medical facility with a heavy heart. He'd saved Cathara's life, but he was beginning to realize that survival might not be enough. In the complex world of military politics and wartime ethics, his simple act of mercy was becoming a much larger question about humanity's values and priorities. That evening, Marcus sat in the base's observation lounge, looking out at the stars and thinking about the choices that had brought him to this point. He was joined by Williams, who'd apparently heard about his reassignment. "So, you're shipping out to transport duty," Williams said, settling into the chair beside him. "That's got to sting." "Could have been worse. Harrison could have court-martialed me." "For what? Saving a life?" Williams shook his head. "Sometimes I don't understand this war. We're supposed to be the good guys, but half the time it feels like we're just another faction fighting for territory and resources." "Maybe that's what makes us different," Marcus said. "The fact that we question it. The Zephyrians, the hegemony, they all seem pretty sure they're in the right. We at least admit we might be making mistakes." "You think bringing back the Zephyrian was a mistake?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching a supply convoy navigate between the base's defensive positions. "I think it was the right thing to do. Whether it was smart, that's still an open question. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing too." Williams stood to leave. "The universe has enough death in it. Maybe it needs more people willing to choose life, even when it's complicated." After Williams left, Marcus continued to sit in the observation lounge, thinking about Cathara lying in the medical facility, about the interrogation she'd face tomorrow, about the uncertain future they both faced. He'd made a choice based on conscience rather than strategy, and now they would all have to live with the consequences. But as he looked out at the stars, Marcus realized he didn't regret his decision. In a war that seemed to dehumanize everyone it touched, showing mercy to a fallen enemy felt like an act of rebellion against the very nature of conflict itself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moral complexities, and new questions about the price of doing what he believed was right. But tonight, Cathara was alive, and that was enough. The interrogation room was deliberately sterile and intimidating. White walls, bright lighting, a metal table bolted to the floor, and chairs that were designed for function rather than comfort. Marcus stood against the back wall, officially there as a witness but really present to ensure Cathara was treated properly. She sat across from Major Rebecca Stone, the base's intelligence officer, her injured legs hidden beneath the table by a standard-issue blanket. "Sub-Commander Cathara," Major Stone began, her voice professionally neutral. "You understand that as a prisoner of war, you are required to provide only your name, rank, and service number under the Galactic Convention on Armed Conflict?" "I understand," Cathara replied, her violet eyes alert despite the pain medications Dr. Kim had given her. "I am Sub-Commander Cathara, Service Designation Zephyr 774 Alpha, 7th Void Lancer Regiment. However," Stone continued, "cooperation beyond those requirements could result in improved conditions during your captivity and potentially expedited medical treatment for your injuries." Marcus watched Cathara consider this offer. Over the past 2 days, while she'd been recovering from surgery, They'd had several conversations about human customs and military procedures. She understood that cooperation might literally be the difference between walking again and spending the rest of her life confined to a wheelchair. "What kind of information do you seek?" Cathara asked. "The data files you recovered from the Hegemony Research Station. Our initial analysis suggests they contain information about advanced plasma weapon systems. We'd like you to help us interpret the technical specifications." "And in exchange?" "Continued medical care, including evaluation for prosthetic limbs, comfortable quarters rather than a detention cell, access to reading materials and recreational activities." Stone paused. "And protection from any Zephyrian forces that might view your cooperation as treason." Marcus felt his stomach tighten at that last point. He hadn't considered that helping Cathara might actually put her in more danger from her own people, but Cathara showed no visible reaction to the threat. "The files contain technical data about hegemony research into quantum plasma projection systems," she said after a moment of consideration. "The technology is still in experimental stages, but if perfected, it could produce weapons with 3 times the energy output of current Zephyrian plasma rifles." "Why was your unit investigating this facility?" "High Command suspected the hegemony was close to a breakthrough. If they succeeded in developing these weapons, it would give them a significant advantage in ground combat." Cathara shifted in her chair, wincing slightly as the movement disturbed her healing injuries. "My unit was tasked with gathering intelligence on their progress and, if possible, sabotaging the research." "Were you successful?" "Partially. I managed to download approximately 60% of their research data before the mine explosion. The files are encrypted, but I can provide the decryption keys." Major Stone leaned forward slightly. "That's very valuable information, Sub-Commander. Why are you willing to share it with us?" For the first time since the interrogation began, Cathara looked directly at Marcus. "Because a human soldier risked his career, and possibly his life to save mine. Honor demands that I repay that debt." "Honor also demands loyalty to your own people," Stone pointed out. "How do you reconcile those conflicting obligations?" "My people abandoned me to die alone on an enemy world," Cathara replied, her voice carrying a note of bitter finality. "Whatever loyalty I owed them was severed when they chose to leave me behind. Now my loyalty belongs to those who have shown me mercy and compassion." Marcus felt a complex mix of pride and concern at her words. Pride that his actions had earned such respect from a warrior culture that valued honor above all else. Concern that Cathara was burning bridges she might need later. The interrogation continued for another 2 hours, with Cathara providing detailed technical analysis of the hegemony weapon systems and tactical information about Zephyrian military operations. Her cooperation was complete and apparently genuine, though Marcus could see the emotional cost it extracted from her. She was betraying everything she'd been trained to protect, and doing it because a human stranger had refused to let her die alone. After the session ended, Marcus walked with Cathara back to the medical facility. She was using a manual wheelchair now, having flatly refused the assistance of orderlies or medical staff. Independence, even in her disabled state, was apparently crucial to maintaining her sense of dignity. "You didn't have to tell them everything," Marcus said as they moved through the base corridors. "You could have given them just enough to satisfy the bargain." "I told you, human, I repay my debts completely." Cathara maneuvered her wheelchair with surprising skill, considering she'd only been using it for a day. "Besides, the information I provided may help end this war sooner. Fewer soldiers on both sides will die if the hegemony's weapons research is stopped. Your people won't see it that way. To them, you'll be a traitor. To them, I am already dead." Cathara's voice was matter-of-fact. "A warrior who cannot walk, cannot fight, cannot keep up with her unit has no place in Zephyrian society. By saving my life, you made me an exile. By treating me with dignity, you made me grateful for that exile." They reached the medical facility, where Dr. Kim was waiting with news that would change everything. Sub-Commander Sergeant Chen. Dr. Kim's expression was unusually excited for someone who typically maintained professional detachment. I've been working with the prosthetics team, and we've had a breakthrough. The neural interface technology we've been developing might be compatible with Zephyrian physiology. Meaning? Marcus asked. Meaning we might be able to fit Cathara with powered prosthetic legs that respond to neural commands. She could potentially regain full mobility. Dr. Kim pulled up holographic displays showing technical schematics. The procedure would be experimental, and recovery would take months, but the initial compatibility tests are promising. Cathara stared at the holographic leg designs with undisguised amazement. You would do this? For a prisoner? For an enemy soldier? For a person who deserves a chance to live without limitations, Dr. Kim replied. Though I should mention, the procedure hasn't been approved yet. It would require authorization from Fleet Command, significant resource allocation, and long-term commitment to rehabilitation. What are the chances of approval? Marcus asked. Honestly, not great. The military tends to prioritize resources for our own people, and experimental procedures on prisoners are politically complicated. Dr. Kim's expression became apologetic. But the intelligence you've provided, Cathara, has already prevented several hegemony attacks. That might carry some weight with the decision-makers. Over the following days, Marcus prepared for his transfer to transport duty while monitoring Cathara's situation. The request for prosthetic surgery was working its way through military bureaucracy, encountering resistance at every level. Some officers argued that providing advanced medical care to enemy prisoners set a dangerous precedent. Others questioned whether the resources could be justified when human soldiers were dying for lack of adequate medical supplies. The debate reached a turning point when news arrived that changed the entire strategic situation. Marcus was in the base communications center when the priority message came through from Fleet Headquarters. The message was addressed to Colonel Harrison, but its implications affected everyone on the base. Attention all personnel, Harrison's voice echoed through the base communication system an hour later. At 1400 hours Standard Time, Admiral Chen of the 4th Fleet received a priority communication from the Zephyrian High Command. They are requesting negotiations for a temporary ceasefire in the Kepler sector. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. Admiral Chen was his father. Though they'd spoken perhaps a dozen times since Marcus enlisted, the family connection had always been more burden than benefit in his military career. Furthermore, Harrison continued, the Zephyrians have specifically requested that their representative be allowed to meet with Sub-Commander Cathara, who they apparently believe is being held prisoner at this facility. They've indicated that her treatment and condition will significantly influence their willingness to engage in peace negotiations. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Cathara wasn't just a wounded prisoner anymore. She'd become a symbol of human treatment of Zephyrian captives. Her fate could literally determine whether this war continued or began winding down toward peace. Marcus found Cathara in the medical facility's rehabilitation center, working with a physical therapist to strengthen her remaining leg muscles in preparation for potential prosthetic fitting. When he told her about the communication from her government, her reaction was complex and conflicted. They want to meet with me? She asked, setting down the resistance weights she'd been using. After abandoning me to die? Apparently your capture has political implications neither side anticipated, Marcus said. If the Zephyrians see that we've treated you well, it might convince them that humans can be trusted in peace negotiations. And if they see that I have cooperated with human intelligence services, that could go either way. They might view it as pragmatic survival, or they might consider it treason. Marcus sat down beside her wheelchair. The choice is yours, Cathara. You can meet with their representatives or refuse to see them. What do you think I should do? I think you should do what feels right to you. You've spent 3 years fighting this war. You've seen more death and destruction than anyone should have to witness. If there's a chance your situation could help end the fighting, maybe that's worth considering." Cathara was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. In Zephyrian culture, personal honor is supposed to be more important than political considerations. But watching my own people abandon me has made me question many things I once believed without doubt. Such as? Such as whether honor that demands leaving wounded comrades to die is really honor at all. Whether strength that cannot show mercy is really strength. Whether a society that values only the physically capable is truly worthy of preservation. She looked up at Marcus with those penetrating violet eyes. "You humans have shown me alternatives to everything I was taught was unchangeable truth. We're not perfect. Our society has its own problems, its own blindness to certain truths. But maybe that's why peace negotiations matter. Different perspectives challenging each other to become better." 2 days later, the Zephyrian diplomatic shuttle arrived at the forward operating base. Marcus watched from the observation deck as the sleek, crystalline vessel settled onto the landing pad with graceful precision. The delegation that emerged was led by Admiral Thexera, a tall Zephyrian with the kind of presence that commanded attention even from different species. The meeting between Cathara and the Zephyrian delegation took place in the base's main conference room, with human observers present to ensure proper protocol. Marcus wasn't allowed inside, but Dr. Kim later described the encounter to him. "It was fascinating from an anthropological standpoint," she said. Admiral Thexara clearly expected to find Cathara broken, possibly tortured, definitely demoralized. Instead, she found a warrior who'd been given hope for recovery and treated with dignity despite her disabled condition. How did Cathara handle it? Like the political opportunity it was, she showed them the prosthetic designs, explained the rehabilitation process, and demonstrated how we'd accommodated her disability without treating her as helpless. By the end of the meeting, Admiral Thexara was asking detailed questions about human medical technology and social support systems for disabled individuals. The immediate result was approval for Cathara's prosthetic surgery, funded jointly by human and Zephyrian resources as a gesture of cooperation. But the larger implications became clear over the following months as Marcus served his transport duty assignment. The Kepler sector ceasefire held, gradually expanding into broader peace negotiations. Stories spread through both militaries about the human sergeant who'd refused to abandon a wounded enemy, and the Zephyrian warrior who'd found honor in cooperation rather than death. The narrative became a symbol of the possibility for understanding between species that had seemed irreconcilably different. Marcus was reassigned to Earth 6 months later, where he found himself testifying before a Senate committee about the ethical treatment of prisoners of war. His simple act of mercy on a distant battlefield had somehow become a case study in military ethics and interspecies relations. "Sergeant Chen," Senator Williams asked during one hearing, "do you believe your actions were consistent with military discipline and good order?" "Senator, I believe my actions were consistent with the values we claim to be fighting for," Marcus replied. "If showing mercy to wounded enemies undermines military discipline, then maybe we need to reconsider what kind of military we want to be." A year after the rescue on Kepler 442b, Marcus received an invitation to attend Cathara's graduation from prosthetic rehabilitation. The ceremony took place on the neutral station where peace negotiations were being finalized. When he saw her walk across the stage on legs that responded to her thoughts as naturally as flesh and bone, Marcus understood that his choice to value life over strategy had rippled far beyond anything he'd imagined. "You were right, human," Cathara told him after the ceremony. "Sometimes the most logical thing to do is ignore logic entirely." "And you were right too," Marcus replied. "Honor isn't about following rules blindly. It's about making choices that let you live with yourself afterward. The war officially ended 3 months later, with Cathara serving as a cultural liaison, helping former enemies understand each other well enough to build a lasting peace. Marcus returned to active duty with a commendation for actions that had initially earned him a reprimand. Years later, when military historians studied the end of the Human-Zephyrian War, they would identify multiple factors that contributed to the peace: strategic stalemates, economic pressures, war weariness on both sides. But many would argue that the real turning point came when a human sergeant chose compassion over protocol, and an alien warrior discovered that strength could be found in cooperation rather than conquest. The simple act of refusing to abandon a wounded enemy had somehow convinced two species that their differences didn't have to be solved through violence. In the end, Marcus learned that the most human thing about humans wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their stubborn refusal to accept that cruelty was inevitable, even in the darkness of war. Sometimes the greatest victories came not from defeating your enemies, but from refusing to let them remain enemies at all.